Historic, groundbreaking, a turning point. Those are just some terms used to describe the vote in 3 states this week to allow same-sex marriage. Voters in Maine, Maryland, and Washington state said yes to it. It marks the first time voters and not legislators or judges have actually decided the issue. Opponents, however, say the laws endanger the very fabric of society. Joining me now is Professor Charles McKinney. He's a civil rights historian. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
So do you think the passage of same-sex marriage laws in Maine, Maryland, and Washington signal the beginning of a cultural shift?
I think that's quite possibly the case. As we've seen in the past, legislatures that have tried to pass this have been less successful. So this could be an indicator of a significant shift or the confirmation of a shift that's already taken place in people's thinking around this issue.
You know, there are certainly times within our history as a nation that many look back and they say, we can't believe that we let this happen. For example, laws banning African Americans from voting, laws banning African Americans and whites from marrying. Do you think that we are living through a period like that in our history where we might look back, say, 30, 40 years from now and say, we can't believe we didn't allow same-sex couples to marry?
I think we're always living in a period like that in our history. You know, there's always been a group of people who have been historically disenfranchised, who have been historically disconnected from the mainstream of American life. Many of us look back now and say, I can't believe there was a time where, as you just stated, African Americans and whites could not marry each other. And so, you know, a number of years from now, we probably will look back on this period and say, wow, you know, there used to be a time where we would stop people from marrying one another on the basis of the fact that they were of the same gender. So I think that, you know, I think that we're definitely at a turning point.
What about opponents to these laws? They say such a radical change in the definition of marriage will produce a host of societal conflicts that government, exercising its enormous enforcement powers, will have to resolve. Now, based on a dangerous and deadly history with past civil rights movements, do you see societal conflicts coming from laws such as these?
Yes. I mean, you know, again, societal conflict is part and parcel of social change. And when we're talking about changes that seem sort of titanic to a critical mass of people, there's going to be tension, right? It's not a matter of if there's going to be tension. It's not a matter of if there's going to be conflict. The question becomes, what sort of form is this conflict going to take, right? Is it going to be a legislative conflict? Certainly there's going to be a cultural conflict. But again, you know, we've seen this shift, and more people as we bring on more and more millennials, as we bring in more and more young people into the electorate. That's always been a very significant turning point. It was a turning point in the '60s when a new generation of young people came on the scene and said, hey, you know what? The racial norms from our parents' generation, those don't make sense to us anymore, right? And so. And so again, I think the pressure from below to effectuate a fundamental change in the way we think and the way we administer these laws, I think that's going to be inevitable.
I want to quickly share with you an op-ed published in the New York Times the day after Maine and Maryland passed the laws allowing for same-sex couples to marry. It reads in part, with these victories, opponents will no longer be able to argue that the movement for marriage equality is something imposed by radical judges and legislators who are out of touch with the popular will. It is a moment for the opponents of civil rights for all Americans, including congressional Republicans, who are still defending the Marriage Act in court to decide whether they want to continue to stand against justice to court a dwindling share of voters. Now, these measures, as you well know, didn't pass by very much. Do you agree with the op-ed? Do you think that the laws are still in danger of being repealed?
Yes, I think the laws are in danger of being repealed. And again, we're at a very pivotal moment, and history reveals to us that these pivotal moments, they move in slow motion, right? You know, back in the '60s, I remember California, you know, trying to pass a referendum which would legalize housing discrimination, right? So, you know, we've got a long way to go in this, and so, you know, for proponents of the issue who say, you know, we're at a turning point, we're at a turning point. As a historian of the civil rights, of the African-American civil rights struggle, I frequently remind people that, hey, turning points can take decades, right? Turning points, we don't measure turning points in a matter of days, weeks, months. We measure turning points in many instances in a manner of in decades, right? Brown v. Board of Education was a turning point. But it took another 20 years in my neck of the woods. I'm down here in Memphis, right? It took another 20 years to actually start desegregating the schools, right? So we've got to be very mindful of what we've got to be very mindful in terms of how we're framing the issue, in terms of how we're categorizing these turning points, because again, turning points can take a while.
Professor Charles McKinney, pleasure to have you on this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.